Hello everyone, this video will cover Module 13. Module 13 covers symbols, and this module I'm going to go ahead and just open it up now along with Module 12, but Module 12 is due first. I'm opening them up kind of at the same time because theme, which is covered in Module 12, and symbols, which are covered in Module 13, are very similar concepts. And so a lot of times students just get a better handle on it when they can work with them together. So they are separate chapters in the textbook, and they do have separate readings associated with them, as well as separate quizzes and separate assignments. But you might find that reading, for example, just that introductory part of the chapter one after another might help you out a little bit with understanding. Theme in particular can be difficult to understand, and so often when you can relate it to something like a symbol, which are sometimes easier to find, then it can help you out a little bit. Both concepts really require a lot more of a deeper level of understanding, a deeper level of thinking, and so we're trying to really get into what is the meaning behind things. And so in this case, with a symbol, we're looking at the meaning behind characters, objects, places, etc. in a story. Now, the one thing to remember about symbols is that it's not a game like a symbol hunt. And often there are some obvious symbols and some less obvious symbols, but that doesn't mean that everything is a symbol. And it's also not necessarily like find the right symbol and the right meaning behind a symbol. There are some obvious wrong answers to what a symbol might mean. That is, trying to associate something with something completely outside of the story, or something that doesn't have anything to do with the story, or something that's anachronistic, that is, has something to do with something that would have happened after the story was written. However, that does not mean that two people can't look at a story, find completely different symbols, or see the same symbol and think it might mean something different. And that's fine too. So just kind of keep that in mind, that just the same way that theme works, there's not always a right answer. And sometimes they're obvious and sometimes they're not so obvious. And so you just have to kind of work with the story a little bit in order to get them. If you ever have any questions, of course, you can always send me an email. So the assignments in this module, very similar to what we've done before. You have a quiz over the vocabulary terminology for symbols and kind of the concepts behind symbols, and then you have a discussion board. So the discussion board for this unit is just like we've done before. Everyone can only pick one story. Every story can only be used once. By this point, we have lots of stories to choose from. And so I imagine that the stories in the chapter on symbols will be some of the first to be selected. But just like you've done before, you can create your post, and then there should be an option to edit your post. You'll see this little symbol up here, the three dots, three vertical dots. That's always a way to edit something in Canvas. So you definitely can put in your author and title and sort of claim your story, and then go back in and edit it. So what you're doing for your post is listing 3 to 5 symbols used in the story and explaining their significance to the story, the meaning behind them, and that kind of thing. So if you see this particular thing and you think it means something, then you would explain what it is, explain what it means, and then why is it significant to the story. For your response posts, you have a couple of options. You can do all 3 options if you want to, but you really have to do one. And so for your response post for one of your peers' stories, you look at the story, you can either find more symbols, ones that they didn't see, and some of our stories are pretty heavily symbolic, so you might be able to find multiple symbols that they did not see, but that might be more difficult because after a certain point the obvious ones will have been discussed already, and you can't reuse symbols. So look at the more symbols. You can also discuss a different story that uses the same or similar symbols. They don't have to be exact, but if you see a flower used in this story and a flower used in this story, that would be obviously maybe different types of flowers, but they're a similar symbol. Or you might see a flower used in this story and then a piece of jewelry used in this story, except that both of those things represent pretty much the same thing. So the meaning behind them might be the same, even if the object is not the same, or characters that become symbolic in similar ways. And so you want to make sure that the connection is fairly obvious between the two that you can make, but I am interested in seeing what can you tie together. So even if you feel like it's a little bit of a stretch, go ahead and include it, especially if you can find multiple points of connection within the same story. So some of you did this with the comparison essay, and so hopefully now we'll have some new stories to look at to make these connections. The last option is to just explore further a particular type of symbol that is posted in your peer's post. So if your peer used a flower, I keep going back to that as an example, used a flower as one of the symbols in the story and explained how it worked within the story, then you would do a little bit of research on kind of the history behind, or the use behind flowers as symbols in stories or movies or whatever. So wherever we generally tend art as well, we tend to see some symbols in art. And so anything you can tie that in, and why are flowers used so often to represent that feminine beauty? What are some examples of that? So you could get into a little bit more interesting kind of side pieces of information, as long as you're telling us what resource you found. Then you're fine. And so that's just an option for you to kind of look a little bit more deeply into one particular type of symbol, as opposed to that how that symbol is used in that specific story. So just some options for you for those responses, and you could do a different type of response to to two different peers if you want to. So those are just what you're going to be working on in this module. As usual, if you have any questions, let me know. We are almost to the end of the semester by this point, and so all we have left is your research project, which will turn in, and then you have your last test, and then your last writing assignment, technically last essay, but it's not a terribly long one. And now those 3 modules will probably be opened up. The research project will be first, but then the last 2 kind of go together, so those will be open together. If you have any questions, particularly about your grade, make sure that you email me now. Don't wait to ask questions about your grade until the last week, because there's not much I can do at that point. So hopefully you're doing well, and I hope you have a great week.